What's up, everyone? I'm Thomas J. Bellezza, and welcome to The Right Mindset. Today, I'm going to go over the major difference between an author and a writer and ask that age-old question, am I really an author if I've never been published? Let's do it. Oh, a big massive thank you to everyone who's been watching these videos, supporting the channel, and of course subscribing, which brings me to the next point. If you are a beginner writer or you've been writing for some time now and you want to learn a little bit more about the craft of writing, maybe the business behind the writing, and of course hearing straight from the author's mouth through interviews, give this channel a subscribe and press that bell icon so you don't miss out. So let's get to it. I was told to keep the videos interesting, you need like pattern interrupts. So there's a pattern interrupt. Look, now you're retained. I got my audience retention. I'm getting some extra seconds and minutes in here. But really, let's get right into it. What is the difference between a writer and an author? I'm going to read according to the dictionary. It states, a writer is one who expresses ideas in writing or one engaged in literary work. An author is a person who writes a novel, poem, essay, etc. Basically is the composer of a literary work. Now, all authors are writers, but not all writers are authors. And the reason this is stated is because authors compose their own works in different forms that are essentially literary works, whereas writers are people who can be anybody. You can be a ghostwriter for somebody. You can be a copywriter. You can be a blogger. You can write screenplays, scripts, whatever the case may be. Hell, you could be writing for a one day or 1,000 years. Oh my God, what is your secret to you look so good for 1,000 years old? How have you been maintaining your health and still be considered a writer, which is great because it doesn't matter. If you write from home, if you write in your privacy of your own home and you're just like, I wrote a little thing today and this helps me work through, I got another haiku out of me, you're still a writer. Authors aren't necessarily writers who have been published, though. That is a misconception of the industry. We like to classify it in our own ways. According to the dictionary and according to the way it's worked out is some might consider the author some might consider you an author because you are published, but not all published authors are still discredited as not being authors. And the reason is because they have literary works. As long as you have literary works, you're an author. It doesn't necessarily have to be published literary works. But, if you're a fantasy author, if you write poems, whatever the case may be, you can even keep it in your own little house. Not the judge, you might have a big house for you. But you are considered an author as long as you have those literary works written. However, the writer, as I said, is anybody who writes. Now, a writer can also be hired to write a book for someone else, which is ghostwriting. You can be hired to write a script. A lyricist is a writer. Now, for me, I would say even if you were editing a book, right? Editing isn't necessarily quote unquote writing because you're looking at what someone else wrote and you're kind of cleaning it up. But if you write on the side at home, but your day job is editing, you are still a writer. Don't let people tell you your value like, oh, well, until you're published, self-published or traditionally published still counts, but until you're published, you're not an author. No, I have literary works. I have written books. I have written a collection of poems. I have essays. I am an author. I have authored these works. But you are also a writer. Writers are people who just write. So if you need to put something on your business card, just think of it that way. Do you write to write, or are you more or less writing to compose literary works? Which brings us to Does one have more value than the other? Now, personally, the short answer is no. That's what I believe. I do not believe one has more value than the other. I think authors and writers are just that. As I said earlier, a author is a writer, but a writer isn't necessarily an author. They are the same people. So being a writer is the core of what you do passionately. You write. It's who you are. It doesn't matter if you have author after or screenwriter or you are the copywriter. Your labels have no business representing the value of who you are. And look, uh, uh, and you'd write if you were paid or not, right? So this is the thing. Like, I am a writer. I am also an author, but I am also a screenwriter, but I'm also a lyricist. I'm also someone who writes comedy. I write jokes. Okay. I edit stuff. I consult on projects, right? But I don't need to be justified by what other people think because I know by using logic and deductive reasoning and a little research that I am all the above. So I just call myself a writer. I am a writer. Now, if you just work on literary works, you're an author who is also a writer. Um, but keep in mind, if you're paid or not paid, it does not create a value. I if you're like a journalist or a copywriter or screenwriter or whatever, as long as you're writing, you're a writer. And if you get paid for it or don't get paid for it, you're still a writer. And they all carry the same weight, the same value. You're a paid writer or you're an unpaid writer. You're a writer. That's your value. Don't let people. I once had an agent tell me, uh, "Hey, listen, you're not really considered a professional writer because you haven't worked on anything like a Marvel project." And I was like, "But I literally pay my bills by writing screenplays for other people, for clients, for consulting, for story narration, being a script doctor. I'm paid to write. I'm paid to edit. I'm paid to be in that world. How I'm not professional?" And they go, "Well," I go, "Marvel projects. You need Marvel projects." Marvel. I was like, okay. Don't listen. I've had agents before that represented me. I've had managers that represented me. And if somebody's going to represent you, first, they value you. They support you and they see what your value is as a human being, as a person of substance. And then it so happens that you also are a writer who has a specific field, be it you're an author, a screenwriter, whatever the case may be. Even when I was a lyricist and I would get hired to write lyrics for other people, I wasn't less than valued. So you have to think of yourself like that. Carry that weight of the truth, which is neither is more valuable than the other, and you, as a human being, are 100% valued. Even if you didn't shave that day, like look at these grays. Don't look at my youthful pictures. You'll see that I had a different different color hair back then. So with that said, what if there is no difference in value, how should you categorize yourself? What should I call myself? And really, it depends what you do. And I kind of touched on this where it's like, well, I am a writer, like me. I am a writer, right? However, if you know me in person, I usually tell people I'm an entertainer because I like to perform too. I like to do theater, comedy, musics, whatever the case. I like to act, right? This is what acting means. This is what it looks like. I'm an actor, and that's the thing. Uh, I classify my as an entertainer, right? But from a writer standpoint, it's like you're a writer. But whatever it is you primarily do should be what you're considered. If you're a blogger, you're a blogger. And there's nothing wrong with being a blogger, and there's nothing wrong with being a copywriter, and there's nothing wrong with being a lyricist, just as there's nothing wrong with just being someone who writes books home and never releases them. Like, there is nothing wrong with that. Uh, we as creators, as writers, as imagination wizards that conjure up these worlds and creatures and characters and lives, that's for us. It's great when we turn on the business brain and we say to ourselves, we want to make a career out of this, but that's separate. That's something that I tell people all the time. I go, when you're creating, let you create. Let this be untouched by business. Just absorb the truth that is inside you and let it flow onto the paper or through music or however, jokes, whatever your creative outlet is, just become that creatively, artistically. But once that's done, don't allow the creative brain to be involved in the business brain. Let the business brain sell the creative, because there are two different worlds. And if you separate those two brains, you'll go a lot further. The creative brain is the driving force of what is created, all right? That whole imagination thing. But the business brain is saying, all right, I need the market, I need the network, I need to practice and understand the industry, all that stuff, right? So, how should you categorize yourself if you're thinking like that? Well, creatively, whatever it is you are, that's what you are. If you write literary works, you're an author. If you're somebody who writes screenplays, you're a screenwriter, right? If you're someone who writes lyrics, you're a lyricist. If you're a poet and you didn't know it, you write that. And it really comes down to a marketing thing. Once you're ready to be like, well, I'm trying to market myself as A, B, C, or D. That's the only reason you would need that. However, if you specialize in something, I would really focus on you being the specialization. However, there's nothing wrong with generalizing. If you only write screenplays, though, you are a screenwriter. You're not necessarily an author. You're a screenwriter. And if you're trying to make a career as a screenwriter, you want people to hear that word, that term. In the world of writing, though, it might not influence others to judge you so quickly if you're like, yeah, I'm a writer. Because then writers will be like, well, what do you write? Tell me, what are you working on? However, when you're in the industry and, you're talking to someone who's a producer and you say you're a writer, that doesn't instantly spark their interests. However, if you meet somebody who likes people, they'll be like, "Oh, what do you do?" But if you say screenwriting, "Oh, screenwriter, oh, I'm a producer. What do you do? What do you do?" Right? So it really comes down to, what it is you are specializing in, what do you want to do as a career. But a safe bet is always to say, "I'm a writer," because you can go anywhere with that. Like I said, they're going to ask, and if anyone asks you anything, it's an emotional response, which means they're actually interested. Instead of you going, "Hey, I'm a writer. I do all this stuff." Just say, "I'm a writer." And then they go, "What have you written?" And you go, "I'll tell you." And you could even use that voice. P.S. If the follow-up question to you is, what have you written? Remember, you do not have to impress anyone or justify why and how you are a writer. Because you could just be like, "Hey, I wrote whatever I wrote," because they're gonna be like, "I haven't heard any of that," right? If you're a new writer and you're like, "Oh, well, I written this book," and they're like, "I've never heard of it," right? And it's like it's the same thing with screenplays and stuff like that. But be you, be true, and allow others to see the value of you through your presentation of your personality and how you're interacting with people. Your works are not going to represent you until you start moving in that industry, when your career starts moving a little bit. um Brandon Sanderson, he really like 13 books before he got published, and he had to build relationships with people and really get people like, well, who are you, and it wasn't like they were just like, oh, you have 13 books. It took 13 books. He had to write 13 books. He wasn't being based on his books. However, according to him, I would go do research. Once he was signed, he did go back to the older books he had, and he published them. And if I remember correctly, he reworked some of them, cleaned them up, etc., etc., because presentation, right? So it's gonna happen. You're gonna be like, I'm a writer. Someone's gonna be like, what have you worked on? They might be like, have I heard of any yet? And you'd be like, probably not. And that's okay. You're not the value of what you have done by the level of what you sold. In fact, I've been in situations where they go, have your screenplays been made? And I go, well, I got hired to write the screenplay. The producer who hired me, it's their job to sell it. If they can't sell it, that has nothing to do with the screenplay, Because I mean, think about it. crappy movies get made. And you watch it and you go, how was this new Resident Evil movie made? Right? Because it's not about the screenplay, it's about how you sell the product. But obviously, you want a good product because if you sold it and it does well, they go, what else do you got? Right? But I don't think anyone's really going to be asking about, the next crappy movie. Oh, final thoughts. So, whatever you are, or whatever you title yourself as a writer or an author, you are still a writer no matter what anyone tells you. If they tell you that you are only a writer if you accomplish A, B, and C, then they are absolutely delusional. Don't worry about them. Now, if you have defined what a successful writer is for you and you have reached that, then you are indeed a successful writer. Don't let anyone tell you what a successful writer is. Figure out what it is for you and go and accomplish that. I personally define success as making a living within your field of interest. A living is not a lifestyle. A living is affording an average monthly overhead. However, that's my definition. As soon as I started making a living and paying my bills and affording my monthly average overhead, I considered myself successful. Success is different than longevity. That's the next stage. However, you can define success however you want. Okay? But successful or not, you are still a writer. It doesn't matter if you made it to the top or if you're still starting at the bottom. You're a writer. Accept that awesomeness. And, people who write in private corners of their home into journals, right? I got a thought today where Thomas's eyebrows were amazing today. Oh, I love his beard. I don't mind. I don't mind you writing that in your journal. You could write that, the right mindset was excellent today. Just write that. You're still a writer, okay? Never let anyone ever tell you that you are not a writer if you have not accomplished certain milestones. Ignore them and what their version of success is. You are the judge of your life and success, not the people who are not paying your bills. If people don't pay your bills, don't listen to them. Anyway, the next video in this city. I built this city. I built this city on rock and roll. Now, the next video in this series will be a deeper look into the misconceptions of our industry and advice to get back on track. So, what would you label yourself as? So really think about it. What would you label yourself as according to this video? And do you agree with my analysis as per the presentation? Let me know and our community in the comments below. And if you want to learn a little bit more about the craft, so please tap that subscribe button and click the bell icon so you don't miss out. Also, maybe like, comment, and share the video so we can help others by elevating them with knowledge to work, grow, and rise together as a community of writers. And, the truth of the matter is, keep that creative flow growing as you develop the right mindset.